Welcome to Insider's Viewpoints. What is software engineering? In this video, we will hear from experts discussing software engineering.
I think software engineering is the process of using programming languages and engineering principles to build products. These products could look like web apps, mobile apps, desktop apps, operating systems, or even networking systems. It is a skill that's integral to the success of our modern society because without technology, we couldn't get a lot of things done today. Within software engineering, it's a very broad term. And so within software engineering, you have roles such as front-end, back-end, security, mobile, test, full stack, DevOps, cloud, data, and machine learning. And these are all different types of engineers within software engineering.
I would define software engineering as building and improving software from anywhere from design and architecture to the user interface to fixing small bugs. So anything that falls in that range, that's what software engineers do.
So software engineering to me, I think really has to do with I consider it a creative process, and it fundamentally is the practice of designing, envisioning, implementing, and then supporting and maintaining software through the full life cycle of it. So not just writing code, but in thinking about the software you're building before you've even written a line of code, the journey from idea inception to actual implementation and launching of said software, and then maintaining it, improving it, supporting it, and potentially evolving it to something else. So it's very much a sort of creative and full life cycle end-to-end engineering process.
I know in the United States, at least, software engineering, software development, programming, they all have, depending on who you ask, they mean very specific things or very hazy things or very contradictory things, or it's like, why do we even have 3 different titles for the same thing? I think of those titles as kind of all meaning the same thing.
What's the difference between a software engineer and a developer?
I think the difference for me, I consider engineering to be a little bit sort of broader, software engineering to be broader than development. I think development to me is sort of one part of the process. So I think one fundamental difference for me is I think software engineering is beyond just writing code, which I think a developer often is handed a task to write a piece of code, or create a module, piece of software, whatever term you want to use. And I think engineering involves sort of starting a very long time before you would even get to the development process, and continues on beyond the time you would actually take your code, deploy it. So this kind of goes into the full life cycle.
In my opinion, there isn't a difference really. So for example, I was trained as a full stack engineer or a full stack developer, but I was hired as a software engineer to work on the front end of the company's application. So I think it's a matter of semantics, and a lot of it I think is a lot of gatekeeping to keep people who don't know anything about the industry out. Somebody who has studied CS may argue differently from I do, but as a person with a non-traditional path into the world of software engineering, I only see it as like title changes and title differences, and I think it depends on what company you work in and what company you work for, because at the end of the day, we're all using the same tools and technology to get the product shipped to production.
I think that they are pretty similar roles. They are used interchangeably a lot, I think. But I think the main difference is that software engineers are also responsible for the system design and architecture, as well as data, how it's received, used, and how it's disseminated. Whereas software developers, I think, focus more on the building of apps and features.
So in Canada, being a computer programmer or a software developer is incredibly different than being a computer engineer or a software engineer, where to be an engineer, it means you've taken specific classes in like codes of ethics, and you're held to the same ethical standards as a civil engineer or a mechanical engineer. And so depending on where you are, the titles can mean very different things. And I know for like purposes of immigration, The titles also can mean very specific things, and you have to be careful about like what it is that you put down. But in job descriptions, I kind of see them all used interchangeably, and I tend to just kind of think of them all as the same thing.
It's much of more of a longer time horizon, I think, in terms of engineering versus development. I think there's a lot more considerations and hats you need to put on throughout the software engineering life cycle versus the kind of more narrowly scoped development cycle.